What is arms control and international security? It is an actual topic you can study at university. It is an actual job. It is an actual sector within the larger security apparatus. So, arms control, think about treaties and agreements. It really is different countries, different state actors coming to the negotiating table to figure out how to keep the world safe, to figure out rules of the road, to figure out how to create some sort of framework where one country who has a lot of weapons and another country who has a lot of weapons can make sure that we never get so beyond the point where we can't resolve our issues that we have to resort to using said weapons. So those agreements and those treaties are meant to keep egos, keep emotions, keep uh, disagreements in check. Okay, but right now where we are, the entire arms control regime around the world is threatened. Um, Russia has walked away from the table multiple times. Um, In fact, Russia walked away from the Budapest Agreement, where they recognized Ukraine's sovereignty in 1996 or 1997. I can't remember which. But treaties and agreements are a way for us to operate in harmony is a strong word, peacefully around the world. But we're in a very dangerous position right now, historically speaking, in 2025, where arms control is pretty much just something that existed, past tense, but but states aren't seeing any real um, benefit from participating in treaties and agreements. So that's one part of it. So international security, what is international security? So when you think about national security, when you think about things that are in the interest of the United States, think about things that are in the interest and the betterment for the rest of the world. For instance, countries not getting involved in nuclear war, right? That is in the best interest of absolutely everyone. Um, Bad state actors who may not have weapons of mass destruction capability, but who are looking into gaining weapons of mass destruction, which is the huge contention with Iran. So it's this global security aspect of making sure that states act in a way that prevent large scale war and also try to prevent conflicts. That doesn't always work, but essentially international security concerns itself with war. So that's kind of the breakdown of arms control and international security. There's a diplomatic piece that hopefully can stop the war piece right before we get there. So they work in tandem. So that's when I talk about arms control and international security, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I teach, that's what I study. Um, So that's where my expertise is grounded, and then I apply that to the space domain. And as you know, you tune into Security Brief, you'll hear more about space security and why that matters, not just for the sake of space, not just for rich billionaires to play around in. It matters for our everyday lives, for GPS, for weather, everything you could think of comes from space. But that's for another day. So today I want to talk about two things. I have this question. Why is diplomacy important? Why do we need diplomacy? So there was this really big story. Um, when I was first thinking about doing Security Brief, I read the story that I got super excited about. Supposedly, certain areas of the UN were going to relocate to Kenya, which was a big deal to have certain agencies within the UN to relocate to Kenya. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, that's incredible. The continent is finally getting the recognition that it deserves. It brings a level of credibility and legitimacy to Nairobi. Now, since that announcement, the UN has said the deputy spokesperson said the proposal to move UNICF, UN Women, and UNFPA from New York is still under discussion. So while the story came out that those agencies were going to move to Kenya, now the UN is saying, "Wait a minute, hold up, nothing's been finalized." Um, Farhan Haque, the deputy spokesperson, said it's not a sure thing. When asked if he confirms reports that UNICF, UN Women, and UNFPA headquarters will be moved from New York to the Kenyan capital of Nairobi by 2026. Hake goes on to say there are certain options, as you know, that are being considered in terms of dealing with making the United Nations more cost effective. So one of the reasons why it's said that parts of the UN was going to move to Nairobi was for cost effectiveness. Now, as we know, we've heard this over and over that this administration is supposedly really interested in saving money, cutting costs. But we've seen evidence to counter that claim. But when it comes to moving certain agencies to Nairobi, this is said to be at the center. Um, Hake goes on to say, we're at an early stage, but what the Secretary General Antonio Guterres told you is that one of the steps being considered is to put more of our operations into the field and into places where the costs are lower. So hey Keisha girl. Um, this is a story that's still developing, and I'm glad I waited. This wasn't on purpose, but there was some sort of divine intervention for me not to talk about the story when I wanted to talk about it last week, because the way that the story came out was that it was a done deal. Okay. So this is definitely um, a situation where we have to wait and see. But I definitely do hope that even if it's not even if it's not these 3 or 4 agencies, I definitely do hope that there's a greater engagement with the UN and the continent, because the continent will factor greatly um, into the global future. Aside from the fact that the continent will have the youngest population of any continent in the world, in terms of the tech talent that exists on the continent, in terms of its natural resources. It's always been about natural resources when it's come to Africa, that Africa has more of a say in its own destination, right? So this is an unfolding situation. I will keep you abreast to it. I know this isn't, one of the most popular stories that people were thinking about and talking about. But when I saw it, as a person who values diplomacy, before we get to, the precipice of conflict or war, this story leapt out to me. It means a great deal to me. So I will keep everyone informed. All right. So another story that's going on that people may not have heard about is, oh my goodness. There is escalation between Russia and the United States. Donald Trump is trying to force Vladimir Putin to come to the table to have a conversation about ending the war in Ukraine. So I'll just read directly from this Hill report that says Trump is rattling the U.S.'s formidable nuclear saber amid his growing frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin's refusal to halt the war in Ukraine, just days ahead of Trump's deadline for a ceasefire. Again, we're talking about another ceasefire. We've been talking about ceasefires for years. And y'all, listen, I feel like I have enough information from my professional perspective that this word has lost its weight, that this word ceasefire doesn't mean much in our current context. We heard the word ceasefire over and over with Israel and Gaza, and that kept constantly being violated. We keep hearing this word ceasefire when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, and it never really seems to happen. And there's a soft ceasefire. There's always a there's always a reason for the ceasefire not holding. And when I say not holding, I mean in the very moment the news is announced, there is some sort of counter attack to completely destroy the ceasefire. So at this point, I don't know how much weight this word actually has, ceasefire. So anyhow, last week, Trump deployed two nuclear submarines closer to Russia in response to threatening rhetoric from a top Kremlin official. Now, I want to give you context. Russia is always talking big and heavy. Russia is always waving the nuclear saber. Always, always. This is nothing new. We can go back to the second time when Russia invaded Ukraine, because please understand, this is the second time. 2014 was the first time with Crimea. So the second time when Russia invaded Ukraine, there was all this saber rattling, all this tough talk around around deploying nuclear weapons in the battlefield. Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal of any country in the world, even larger than ours. But it's not necessarily about the amount of weapons you have. It's about proximity. It's about impact. There's a lot of different things that go into why this is an important conversation. Because, some people have asked me, like, why, realistically, how many nuclear weapons could Iran actually, create? It doesn't matter even if it's just one. One nuclear weapon is way too many, if you ask me. Again, I'm an arms control person. I'm on the side of diplomacy. I am on the side of treaties and agreements and making sure there are enforcement mechanisms to hold people accountable if they violate, like when Russia walked away from New START. Don't get me started, because I can go on a rant about this. So anyway, back to the story, y'all. um, so last week, Trump said that he deployed two submarines closer to Russia. Now, what's also adding to the chaos is, what sort of submarines are we talking about? So the kind of question that's being asked, are we talking about nuclearly armed submarines or nuclear powered attack submarines? Two different things. The confusion adds fuel to this threat. I absolutely agree. Um, the deadline is Friday, so tomorrow. So we'll see what happens here. A lot of people are saying that this is a very risky tactic. It won't sway Putin. You have to understand a few things about Putin. Unlike Trump, Putin's been in this game for a very, very long time. He started his career in espionage, right? He started his career understanding psychology, understanding how to lie, how to obfuscate. He's been understanding how to operate effectively for a very long time, where Trump thinks, because he's a businessman, that he has the necessary skill set to be able to maneuver against a very seasoned politician like Vladimir Putin. Let's see. Yeah, it's just, at this point, I kind of agree with this assessment on the Hill. This Hill article it's more risk than reward. This tough man stance that Trump takes, this deterrence first posture that the United States has decided to lean into. When we bombed Iran, Pete Hegseth came out and said deterrence is back. I don't see that as a flex. It's just my personal opinion. I don't see that as a flex. Diplomacy is hard for a reason, right? Because it takes more than fear mongering. It takes more than showing your weapons and your guns. You have to have a skill set. You have to come to the negotiating table. And the thing about diplomacy, let me tell you something, why deterrence first is easier. Negotiating is hard. Now, this is supposed to be the thing that Trump is supposed to be really good at, y'all, right? All these deals that he's supposed to be making in all these different countries. Making deals where you have to give up something to get something for the greater good, that's the hard thing to do. Diplomacy is hard on purpose because no one will walk away from the table with everything. People come to the negotiating table knowing that. But where we are right now in the world, that work is too hard. No one wants to give a little for the safety of their people and everyone else around the world. Achieving peace is hard. A lot of these leaders around the world that's leaning into authoritarianism, that want to be these dictators and that want to be these demagogues, their egos are putting the world at risk. Democracy is hard because you have to get consensus on certain things. But no. Dictators, nope, they think they have all the answers. They don't want to have to go through the process of getting other people's opinions and then coming together to make a majority rule sort of decision. They want to do all the decision making. And that's the dangerous part of it, because these men believe they are the ones who have the answers to all the things. Now, I have been in school. It took me a very long time to get through all of my education, from my BA, my 2 masters, and my PhD, because I respect how serious the world is. I respect how serious it is when you are talking about global security. When you are a country like the United States, when you have so much responsibility around the world, that is a very serious position to be in. You can't take that lightly. It's not a game. It is not a game. And so many of these men who are trying to play king are treating it like it's a game. People's lives are at stake. We need diplomacy. We need serious and trained diplomats, statesmen and women, people who understand their jobs, people who understand what's at stake beyond optics and beyond their egos. Because let me tell you something, another thing that's hard about diplomacy. You may have to take a public lick. And what I mean by that is, you may not be able to come back and say, hey, I got all the things we wanted. No, you're going to have to give some things up. And maybe that may not bode well in public opinion, but that's what you have to do for the greater good. These men, in my personal opinion, do not care about the greater good. They care about winning, whatever that is, at all costs. And we are the cost. We are the collateral damage. I don't want to scare people. The people who are watching right now, you are all pretty, well versed in politics. You're very engaged people. But the largest danger to our world right now are these men who are trying to play king, who believe they are the only ones who have the answers, and they don't. This is why diverse ideas and opinions are important. This is why it is also important to have women sitting around the table. Because unfortunately, where we are right now, I'm not trying to bash men. And there are men in my world, in my sector, who would agree, maybe the guys haven't gotten everything right. Maybe it might be time to give other folks a chance at this thing, a chance at peace, a chance at diplomacy, a chance at fixing problems that do not involve weapons, really, really dangerous weapons. Because another story that I'm going to talk about next week is about placing nuclear reactors on the moon. Hmm. I have a lot to say about that, but I'm going to leave this here today. This is just a security brief, and I mean that brief. I want to keep it brief. I don't want to overwhelm people because there is so much going on around the world. And I am also going to keep you abreast to what's happening with the situation with the UN and Kenya. I really, 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 really hope that this plan can continue. I know that this administration doesn't value anything that has to do with Africa beyond exploiting it for its minerals. But I genuinely hope that the UN sticks to this plan and moves those agencies to Nairobi. And when I come back next week, I'm going to talk about those nuclear reactors on the moon and what that means and what it doesn't mean. And I'm still working through it, see how it goes. I'm going to make some clips of this and put it out. And I might bring some friends just to chit chat. This is very informal. I didn't want it formal like my show Nightcap with the Persist Network. This is me briefing you on what's happening around the world. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining. And this is very special content for my paid subscribers. And I really, really, really appreciate y'all. Um, it means a great deal to me that you are willing to give your hard-earned money in this very hard environment and climate that we're living in, and that you're trusting me to bring you um, this information in a way that you can trust. All right, y'all. Talk to you next week. You're very welcome, Carrie. She said he's a very skilled psychopath. Honestly, girl, listen, uh, being a leader low key, like I've been thinking about this. I do a lot of work around decision makers. You're not wired the same way. You're not wired the same way to a lot of other people. You got to be on a whole nother wave of thinking uh, to be a leader of some of these great nations. So you may not be far off. I don't know about psychopath, but there's definitely some sort of psychology that's going on there. All right, y'all. I'm going to go and thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see y'all next week where I'm going to talk about the reactors on the moon. Okay. Bye.